Welcome to Hormuz Updates. I am going to tell you the full story of how the Iran-Israel war started. Not just what happened on February 28, 2026, but everything that led up to that day. The decades of tension, the broken deals, the proxy wars, the failed peace talks, and finally, the moment the bombs dropped. If you want to understand what is happening right now in the Middle East, this is where you start. Let us go back to the beginning. Iran and Israel were not always enemies. Hard to believe, but before 1979, the two countries actually had close ties. Trade, diplomacy, cooperation. That all changed with the Iranian Revolution. When the Islamic Republic took power, it declared Israel its enemy. It cut all relations. And it began building what it called an axis of resistance. That meant funding and arming groups across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, militias in Iraq, Houthi fighters in Yemen. All of them pointed directly at Israel. For the next 4 decades, Iran and Israel fought what experts call a shadow war. Assassinations, cyber attacks, sabotage, and proxy battles. Neither side declared open war, but they were fighting constantly through other people in other countries. Then came the nuclear question. Iran began developing its nuclear program. It said the program was for peaceful energy. Israel and the United States said that was a lie. They believed Iran was trying to build a nuclear weapon. And a nuclear Iran, they argued, was an existential threat to Israel and to the entire Middle East. In 2015, the world tried diplomacy. A major international deal called the JCPOA was signed. It was supposed to limit Iran's nuclear program in exchange for lifting international sanctions. For a moment, it seemed like the crisis had been managed. Iran agreed to restrictions. International inspectors were allowed in. Oil money started flowing again. Then, in 2018, the United States pulled out of the deal. Iran began ignoring its terms in 2019. Enriched uranium started stockpiling again. International inspectors were gradually pushed out. The deal was dead. Over the next few years, Iran's nuclear program accelerated. By January 2026, the government shut down the internet across the entire country to stop the protests from spreading. The Iranian regime was shaking from the inside. Meanwhile, diplomacy was quietly happening in the background. In February 2026, Iran and the United States held indirect nuclear talks in Oman. A second round was being planned. There was genuine hope. On February 27th, just 1 day before the bombs fell, Oman's foreign minister announced a breakthrough. He said Iran had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium and to full verification by international inspectors. He said peace was within reach. It was already too late. On February 28, 2026, United States President Donald Trump gave the order. Operation Epic Fury began. American warships launched Tomahawk cruise missiles, B-2 stealth bombers, B-1 Lancers, and B-52 Stratofortresses flew deep into Iranian territory. The targets were missile infrastructure, nuclear sites, military command centers, and Iranian leadership itself. At the same moment, the Israeli Air Force launched what officials called an unprecedented wave of strikes. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed on the first day. Iran's defense minister and several top Revolutionary Guard generals were also killed. Nearly 900 strikes hit Iran in the first 12 hours alone. Iran's response came immediately. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones were launched across the Middle East. They targeted Israel. They targeted American military bases across the Gulf. They threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's oil passes every single day. The war that the world had feared for decades had finally begun. Now, as of today, March 23rd, 2026, we are on day 23 of this conflict, and it is escalating, not slowing down. Iran has now struck near Israel's Dimona nuclear research facility. Nearly 180 people have been wounded in missile strikes on southern Israeli cities. Israel's prime minister called it a difficult evening for his country. Iran has fired its 70th wave of attacks. Bahrain's military has shot down 143 Iranian missiles and 242 drones since the war began. Saudi Arabia intercepted 47 drones in a single 3-hour window. More than 2,300 people have now been killed across the region. Over 3 million Iranians have been displaced from their homes. At least 18 hospitals have been damaged or destroyed. Oil prices have surged past $100 a barrel, with analysts at Goldman Sachs warning that elevated prices could last through 2027. And as of this morning, President Trump issued a 8-hour ultimatum to Iran. He threatened to, in his words, hit and obliterate Iran's power plants if the Strait of Hormuz is not fully reopened. Iran responded by warning that all energy infrastructure in the region could be irreversibly destroyed if its power plants are targeted. The world is watching the Strait of Hormuz. The world is watching what happens in the next 48 hours.